Labor Day, ladies and gentlemen. There's a time where we celebrate typically the end of summer, but it actually has another meaning. So we thought we'd bring on the president of the National Right to Work Committee. His name is Mark Mix. Welcome back, Mark. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing fine, Simon. Happy Labor Day to you.
Indeed. Now, let's talk about this National Right to Work Committee. 2.8 million members. I don't think people have an idea how big this is. You're also, of course, president of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation as well. But you got 2.8 million members.
Yeah, those are the people that have actually interacted with us. They've indicated they support right to work. They've supported us financially, or they've supported us through grassroots mobilization over the last couple of years. And yeah, it's not surprising. We know that at least 8 out of 10 of every American believe that it's wrong to force a worker to pay dues or fees to a union to get or keep a job. And so while we have a lot of activists, we also have a lot of support out there just on the principle alone.
Right, and when I talk about unions, sometimes people from the left side of the aisle say, "Oh, you just hate unions," and nothing could be further from the truth. Not only was I a member of the union, I was actually in charge of my local branch for a while as well, back in the land of my birth, in the National Union of Journalists back in the day. So I'm not anti-union at all, but I'm also not not pro forcing people, which is the key part, to pay for a union that they don't wish to belong to.
That's exactly right, Simon, and that's all the right to work law does. Whether you're looking at the right to work law that's been in place in Iowa for 60 or 70 years, or the laws that are in place in the 26 other right to work states, or the bill that we've introduced in the United States Congress, both in the House and the Senate, that literally, Simon, is a one-page bill. Now, I know that's refreshing after these 2,700-page infrastructure bills that you have to read to know what's in them, but a one-page bill that does not add a single word to federal law. It simply goes into the National Labor Relations Act, which was passed in the 1930s under the Roosevelt administration, and it says the bias in the law will be in favor of, get this, voluntarism as opposed to compulsion.
Wow. How crazy is that, man? Now, look, there's a lot going on under this president and indeed under Nancy Pelosi. There's a lot going on. They're under pressure on all kinds of fronts, right? But it looks like they're still trying to find time to do stuff that will essentially change Iowa's right to work laws via federal fiat.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's a bill that's already passed the House of Representatives. It's in the Senate. It's currently pending in the Senate, but it was passed in the House with no hearings, no testimony. It was simply a bill that was rammed through back in March of this year that the president has said he will gladly sign and aggressively sign if it gets to his desk, that would repeal all 27 right-to-work laws in the country, including Iowa's. And, you wonder, Simon, how in the world can the federal government repeal a state law? Well, that's because the federal government's way too powerful, and they give privileges to states now. They don't exercise or respect states' rights. They basically say, here are the privileges that we grant you, and, if we just change our minds, we'll take them back. And the right-to-work law is one of those privileges that was granted by Congress back in the 1930s, and they can take it back, and they have a bill to do just that.
It's amazing. So could I be forced to join a union?
Well, you really can't be forced to join formally, Simon.
Well,
and, union officials always say that.
Yes.
There you go. There's a case, 1963, the U.S. Supreme Court said that, the original labor policy that said you had to formally join a private organization was probably a bridge too far when it comes to basic associational rights. But they hedged a little bit. They said, well, you don't have to join the union, but you can be forced to pay up to 100% of dues to get or keep your job. And then on top of that, what they said was, and how the unions enforce that is they say, well, if you decide not to join us, even though we can still force you to pay dues, you can't participate in any union activities. You can't play in any reindeer games. You can't vote on who the union leaders are. Or you can't vote on the contract that governs your employment. You can't go to the union hall and drink the beer. But you still can be forced to pay 100% of your dues to keep your job. So it's a Hobson's choice in many instances for workers. Do I protect my ideological and political rights, or do I give up my workplace rights? That's a choice that no worker should have to make, frankly.
Absolutely. I mean, this is nuts, right? People don't understand the power that the federal government still has. If this law were to pass, one assumes that fairly quickly you would find the states, the 27 states, I believe it is, would sue the federal government. You're a lawyer. Would they win?
Actually, I'm not a lawyer. We have 21 lawyers on staff, and so we have way more than enough, Simon. That's a great question. You know, they had this test back in the 1930s when Franklin Roosevelt came into office. He passed what was called the National Industrial Recovery Act, which is very similar to what we have as far as federal policy today. And it was ruled unconstitutional under Ninth Amendment, 10th Amendment decision-making at the court. Well, he then threatened to pack the court. In 1935, I believe it was, there was a Judicial Procedure and Reform Act that was in, and it said that we're going to raise the number of Supreme Court justices to 15. Now, I know this sounds like a repeat and a refrain because we're hearing it again today.
Sure.
But then Chief Justice Charles Evan Hughes and Associate Justice Owen Roberts switched their votes when it came to saying whether or not the new National Labor Relations Act that Roosevelt just basically put in again, they switched their votes, they teamed up with the Three Musketeers, and on a 5-4 vote in the U.S. Supreme Court, they upheld the National Labor Relations Act as constitutional. And of course, the Judicial Procedures and Reform Act went away shortly thereafter, but the country has suffered going all the way back to 1935 with this unique and amazing power that the federal government has imposed on the states when it comes to private sector labor relations.
And of course, big unions, big labor, they've got a massive political war chest, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely, Simon. And you know, we just released a study. We have a sister organization that released a study that documents just on the files and the records that they report to the government. We recognize $1.8 billion on politics and lobbying alone, just in 2 years. $1.8 billion. That's pretty big money. I mean, for politics, it's not big money for government anymore, but it's pretty big money for politics.
There's so many things that we need to keep our eye on, which is luckily we have you because you're doing it for us. There's this getting out of your union dues thing. They're trying to make that quite literally a few days every few years that you'll have the opportunity to stop paying union dues. Literally a few days every few years. If you don't fall in that window, well, you're going to have to keep paying them for another few years. Have I got that right?
You do, Simon, and unfortunately, this is called the escape window period, and literally, it's an escape. You have to figure out how to escape from the union in order to protect your own money, protect your ideology, protect your philosophy, to protect your political rights. And that basically, the majority of the debate over that right now is over a Supreme Court case we won in 2018. We argued a case called Janus v. AFSCME, which was a case on behalf of a government employee in Illinois. And basically, we made the case in that argument with at the U.S. Supreme Court that this was a violation of the First Amendment right of this employee, and that everything that government unions do is political in nature because they're redressing government. They're basically, in Des Moines, they're telling legislators what they have to spend, how they have to spend their money. They're intimately involved in government policy, and the Supreme Court agreed with us. And they said that no government worker can be forced to pay dues or fees to keep their job anymore in government. That's the public sector. What states did, like New Jersey, is immediately upon thinking that was going to pass, that the Supreme Court was going to uphold the First Amendment rights of government workers, and God forbid, they did it. They actually did it. But New Jersey got out ahead of it, and they put up a 10-day window period that if you don't get out and thread that needle just perfectly, Simon, you're stuck in the union for another year at least. We have a case right now pending at the Supreme Court on behalf of 2 teachers in New Jersey that are contesting that unbelievably burdensome window to get out and exercise your First Amendment rights in the Constitution.
I mean, that's really horrific. It genuinely is. It's like, we're going to trap you. We are going to raid your wallet, whether you like it or not. That's fundamentally what this is.
That's absolutely right. And what union officials are saying by addressing and endorsing policies like this, they're saying basically if we give workers a choice, if we allow them to make decisions for themselves, it's possible, perhaps likely, that many of them would decide not to associate with us. So the only way to fix that problem is to create legislation that forces them to associate with the union, forces them to pay dues in the private pay dues. Forbid. They did it. They actually did it. But New Jersey got out ahead of it, and they put up a 10-day window period that if you don't get out and thread that needle just perfectly, Simon, you're stuck in the union for another year at least. We have a case right now pending at the Supreme Court on behalf of 2 teachers in New Jersey that are contesting that unbelievably burdensome window to get out and exercise your First Amendment rights in the Constitution.
I mean, that's really horrific. It genuinely is. It's like, we're going to trap you. We are going to raid your wallet, whether you like it or not. That's fundamentally what this is.
That's absolutely right. And what union officials are saying by addressing and endorsing policies like this, they're saying basically, if we give workers a choice, if we allow them to make decisions for themselves, it's possible, perhaps likely, that many of them would decide not to associate with us. So the only way to fix that problem is to create legislation that forces them to associate with the union, forces them to pay dues in the private sector, and then create unbelievable obstacles for workers to exercise their rights under a First Amendment Supreme Court decision from 2018. The only way they can keep people from leaving is to build the wall. This is like the Berlin Wall of America. You build a wall to keep people in, not to let people out, to keep people in.
Crazy. And this is going on in Chicago as well as New Jersey, right?
Indeed, we have a case on behalf of 2 teachers there who are basically experiencing the same problem. They decided to cross the picket line when the union called the entire educational structure in Chicago out on strike. They wanted to teach their children. They got penalized and they got, intimidated, and they tried to withdraw their union dues as a condition of their employment in Chicago, because Chicago's not a right-to-work state, and the union out there doesn't recognize the Janus decision, so they intimidated these employees. They are part of the litigation at the U.S. Supreme Court as we speak as well.
And what do we call it when a union or union officials spend, $2.5 million on a candidate for governor in, say, Virginia, after they have changed their opinion of right to work? What do we call
Simon,
that?
I would defer to your wonderful accent and your articulation. Why don't you pick something to call it, and I'll agree or disagree. How about that?
I would call that curious.
That's a good word.
It's curious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mark Mix, if people want to find out more about you and your organization, where do they go?
Simon, they can find us on that amazing internet at nrtw.org. nrtw.org.
There you go. That's simple. Mark Mix, it's always a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you very much for joining us today. I really do appreciate it. And you and I am sure, will talk soon, sir.
Thank you, Simon. Appreciate you bringing this up on Labor Day. Happy Labor Day to you.